Now, Gary, you've been around the game for a long time and you've seen some spectacular goals in that time. Some of them you've actually been on the pitch for, some of them you've been in the gantry for, some of them you've probably been at home for. So I was struck by the fact that you said that Alejandro Garnacho's goal was the greatest overhead kick that you've seen scored in the Premier League.
Yeah, I've not seen a goal as good as that from an overhead kick. No, that was the most beautiful overhead kick. I remembered actually there was a goal. It wasn't an overhead kick. Do you remember a Giroud goal at Arsenal that I did?
The Scorpion.
Yeah, the Scorpion
kick,
kick, which was a spectacular goal. I'd never seen that before, but different technique, obviously. I was there the day that Wayne Rooney scored against Manchester City, and that was an amazing goal at that point in the game. But then today, I just felt like that was something that I'd not seen before, and it was what struck me straight away was the fact that he had to move away. He sort of goes in and then has to come back out and move his feet quite quickly, and all of a sudden just sort of throws himself in the air. And as I said just before the end of commentary, I played football at a professional level for a long time. I can't do that, and I'm not talking about the overhead kick. I'm talking about actually getting into the air to even be able to make contact with the ball, because I think I'd break my neck. I literally would, and most players wouldn't know how to do that. It's an absolute, I used to call it gymnastic, acrobatic. That's gymnastics. That's not football. And no, it's the best overhead kick that I've ever seen. And there'll be people, I'm sure, debating that now. There'll be people sort of getting previous overhead kicks out and things like that. And I'm not talking about a bicycle kick. I'm talking about overhead kicks. You know, the ones where you're on the side. Yeah, there've been some spectacular ones of those, and we can all get into that position. Might not be able to sort of execute it, but we can all get into that position. To get into the position that Garnacho did to actually execute that overhead kick, I've never seen that before, no. And the Rooney one is close to it, but that's, for me, is just better.
And in some ways, was it exactly what Manchester United needed on this day, in this atmosphere, when the Everton fans came so wound up with what had happened to them during the international break, and then witnessing that goal was a sort of jaw-dropping moment that made everybody forget everything that was going on before.
Yeah, it was complete shock, wasn't there, around the ground? It just silenced the whole ground, and for the few minutes after that, United were keeping the ball, and it was as if, like you say, it just burst the balloon. Or bubble.
Either
and the balloon. Yeah, there was a narrative today of what this game was going to be. It was going to be an Everton frantic, ferocious start that Manchester United were going to have to hang on in there, and that's how I felt the game might be before. But then that moment just completely changes the dynamic, and it was a beautiful goal. Honestly, I don't get excited by that many goals, as in sort of like from a technical perspective, because most goals we've seen before. Most goals we see lots of. You know, goals from distance, free kicks. You see really good goals, dribbles. But that was just, it blew me away. It honestly did. And I say, it was just something like out of the ordinary, and great to be here, privileged to be here and witness it.
We'll come on to Everton's issues in just a moment, but just to finish off with the game itself, the penalty, we were surprised at the identity of the scorer. The fact that Bruno Fernandes handed over the responsibility when normally he would have been expected to step up and take the kick.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened, and we were hearing from our director, weren't we, that there were pictures of even Erik ten Hag potentially being a little bit surprised as to why Bruno Fernandes hadn't taken it. Is it a case of he's just looked at Marcus Rashford, who obviously is competent at taking penalties, and thought, well, he needs a goal? Or is it something that Bruno Fernandes has looked at and thought, didn't feel right? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have thought it was that, because Bruno Fernandes steps up. He steps up to take free kicks, penalties, big moments. He's not scared of those sorts of things at all, and he would love that moment. So maybe it's a little bit of a, let's say, unselfish play from the captain, and a risk as well, and a risk maybe worth taking, and definitely worth taking now, because maybe he feels that Manchester United do need a confident Marcus Rashford, and I think Bruno Fernandes maybe sees that and has thought, right, go on, you go and score, you get yourself off the mark, as it were, in the game, and get yourself going in this what is a very difficult period for United. So you could say it was a masterstroke from Bruno Fernandes. It would have backfired on him. Would have all said, what were you doing if you'd have missed? And Everton go and score, but that's risks that you take, and he needs to be applauded for that.
A word about Kobbie Mainoo, who was only born in April 2005, turned 18 last April, and a really impressive performance without, as you say, wishing to get too carried away for his first Premier League start.
Yeah, it was impressive, and like you say, there's no point in getting carried away by it, because the reality is he's got 17, 18 years in front of him, and he's got a lot of work to do. But sometimes when you sort of see a player come in for the first time, and the way in which the temperament, he's obviously got technical ability and skill. You know, you don't play for Manchester United in the first place if you haven't got that. You don't get picked by Erik ten Hag if you haven't got that. But then what you don't know, we've seen him before in the younger teams, but what you don't know is how they're going to handle it. And he's gone in there at Goodison Park in what could have been the most ferocious atmosphere at Goodison Park for many a year, with a hostile environment, and he looked class. And we know he's class. You know he's got class. He's got that ability, but he looked class in that environment. And I thought I always judge players, when it's the most difficult part of the game. And Manchester United, when they had that most difficult period in that first half, just before half time for 20 minutes, I thought he was the only player that showed up, the only player that still looked like himself. And the biggest compliment I can pay him, and it hurts to say this, and I think people hopefully will take this in the right sort of spirit. United fans will take it in the right sort of spirit. He looked like a Manchester City player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He looked, honestly, I was watching him and I was thinking, that's a player that Pep Guardiola will be looking at and thinking, I'd want him in my midfield. That's what my midfield players do. And thankfully, Manchester United have got him because he looks so composed and so graceful on the ball, always looking over his shoulder, knowing where he was, letting it run across his body. Not easy to do that. Honestly, it's not. I mean, you know that, Rob. You've watched enough football like I have, and I have to say, at 18 to be doing that out there. Look, he'll have tougher games. He's got a long challenge in front of him of a football career, and there'll be injuries, there'll be ups and downs, there'll be other players coming in. He's playing at a club that's got huge demands upon it. But that was very, very good. That was very good. And like you say, I love seeing a young player come through the academy. There's nothing makes me feel better. And I was actually thinking whilst I was watching the game that McTominay and Rashford and Garnacho and all these players that have come through the academy, there's 4 or 5 out there today. And it's the one thing throughout this last 10 years, you know, Manchester United, I think, have still done well. They've still brought players through. And I mentioned earlier on in the commentary that I'd heard earlier on in the season, because, you know, like everybody, I'm asking, you know, what's going on? Why are they not signing a player in midfield? And it was told to me that, you know, if Mainu stays fit, that they won't sign another midfield player. And then Mainu, I think, got injured or something happened to him. He did.
Had an ankle injury.
An ankle injury. And all of a sudden, then Amrabat came back onto the table. But they weren't going to sign another player. They were looking at Mainu as being the solution. And I was like, that's a lot of faith to put in a young player, Erik ten Hag. But I can see why in that 70 minutes that we've watched him. I was disappointed when he went off. You can't criticise Erik ten Hag for bringing off a young player and putting some experience on. You know, there was still something in the game. United, I don't think, had got the third at that point. But actually, I thought he was still the best player on the pitch for United. And I gave Garnacho the man of the match because I just had to for that goal. But Kobbie Mainoo was Manchester United's best player out there today throughout that game. And mostly in that period when, you know, United was struggling and went to sleep.